Bete Noire by Topher Chambers. It is raining now, as I lay here next to my window. The thunder echoes in the distance, and I cannot help but shake as each rocket's clash stirs in me some dreadful memory that I've hidden from my waking mind. I fear that my next episode will induce in me an unending torment that I will either go mad or will myself unto my eternal sleep. I dictate these words to my friend and confidant, Jerome Ellison, as I have lost my ability to put them down myself due to an unnatural paralysis that has taken control of my being. Please be patient in the telling of my story, as labored breathing and muddled brain have stolen a most prized possession, my ability to communicate fully. Some may call it a physical condition that impairs me. Others may see it as some malady that has sapped from me any sanity that may have existed in my fragile form. I know the cause. It started as a child. I see now it was due to a weak will and coddled upbringing. When I was young, I was sheltered from the more stringent requirements of life. We would spend summers, my family and I, at the lake. I had no responsibilities or any expectation thrust upon me, and was free to explore and relish in my childhood. I would spend my days as a youth, sitting on the wooden deck overlooking the scraggy shoreline and search for new frontiers to conquer through all the books and stories that I could find. However, even as I explored my world through whatever medium I could find, my parents seemed to hover protectively over my shoulder. I tried, at times, to associate with other children my own age, though the nature of my parents usually ended any attempts I made prematurely. Lack of companionship at this early age left me bookish and somewhat naive. I often found myself more comfortable as time progressed with those my senior, as we tended to have more in common than my peers. During my teens, I experienced fitful nightmares. I dreamt of odd shapes and loathsome images that crawled from my subconscious and ate at my dreams as if some cancer that spread its black tendrils. These progressed to the point that when I awoke, I could swear that my nightmares came with me. As I verged on a wakeful state, I would fancy that obscene figures would be standing next to my bed as if my coming to consciousness pulled them into being. Night after night, these visions invaded my psyche and poured on my poor childlike mind a terror that would drive most adults into fits of utter madness. My protective parents were beside themselves. Here their child, whom they protected from all things that could possibly do harm, was suffering from something that they could not control. It was not as if they could warn me away from some fateful decision, nor could they keep me from an influence that could end up doing me harm. These nightmares culminated my 15th year when I repeatedly found myself standing on a cliff ledge overlooking an ancient shore. The craggy cliff face overlooking the roaring surf towered over a strange visage of oddly shaped stones and ruins surrounded by faceless cloaked figures. Voices floated around me, chanting in a language wholly unpronounceable, and to this day, I can still hear that awful racket. It seemed like forever, them just staring at me from under their veils of shadow. On waking, I would find myself unable to move or make a sound, though the figures would still be there, around my bed, looking at me. It would seem like hours that I lay there, unable to move, with my tormentors looking over my lifeless body, chanting in that ungodly language. Once my trance, or so I started to refer to it, ended, I would find myself in my room, staring into space, alone. The final straw for my parents was when it started to happen apparently when I was awake. I would find myself on that cliff, overlooking those loathsome ruins at strange times during my day. After an extremely horrible lapse during a dinner party, my protective parents gave up. They had me institutionalized for the rest of my teenage years. This did not do my already retarded social development any good. To this day, I have a tendency to appear childlike and naive when with peers. As it happens, while this incarceration affected my social bearing, I was finally able to leave these dreams behind me. Formerly diagnosed with night terrors, sleep paralysis, and as a way to explain my daytime episodes, narcolepsy. The doctors gave me appropriate medication and allowed to sleep, finally, in peace. During my 20s, I was finally released back into the world since my torment seemed at an end. I suffered some social repercussions for my absence and tended to spend my time in the company of great works of fiction. It was during this time I attempted to attend the university, focusing on English literature. However, it was soon realized that I was far from the peace I so desperately desired. The dreams returned in my 26th year. They started small at first, as faint echoes of chanting rose in my imaginings. As the time progressed and my dreams persisted, I felt like I could start to understand some of what I heard in these visions. It seemed as if I knew that these robed figures of my past were calling forth or calling to something that rested at the base of the sea. I, to this day, know not of what they were attempting to contact, but know its great power that they sought. I decided not to be afraid of what I was experiencing and embrace the possibility that I was supposed to be seeing these things. I was not sure if it were real or not. However, I chose to find out if I could stop whatever torment they intended to bring to the world. In my waking moments, I sought all the knowledge I could about these figures and the language that resounds throughout my entire being. I would sequester myself in ancient libraries and pore over books of such antiquity as to question if they were ever really written or had been born into the world at a time when the earth was young. Since my departure from normal society so many years ago, it was easy for me to hide myself away without drawing any unwanted attention. For years, I devoured everything I could on the subject matter. The more I learned, the deeper into the dreams I went. With some trials and errors, I was able to induce the dreams at will. In this state, I was free to travel around and explore the world in which I found myself. The results would always be the same. Upon waking, I would find myself stuck in the usual paralysis. In the beginning, it would last for only a few minutes. However, the longer I found myself in my dreams, the longer my paralysis would persist. When my search for the truth found bore no real fruit in the waking world, I turned to the other in order to find what I sought. Since the world in my mind was taking on more reality than the one I woke to every morning, I was set that the answers I was so doggedly hunting for were there to be found. By this time, I was able to move to more places than just the cliff's edge and below. There were beautiful vistas where the sky seemed to become one with the earth, and place of such alien design as to question if I was still on my own planet. I found others who spoke so many languages that I am sure my subconscious cannot be the only root cause. I knew that my salvation or damnation hinged on what I could find. Years of searching brought me to many places, including my early 30s. The wear it took on my body was starting to take its toll. I spent most of my days unable to move my extremities. I would spend hours sitting in my study, numb from the waist down, and only able to move my arms with extreme force of will. Despite the horrible sacrifice I was making, I knew that my cause was one of importance. These figures, which never leave my side as long as the paralysis is present, are searching, waiting, calling something. I was driven to find what it was and how to forestall their goals. After my parents passed on my 38th year, my resolve was never more concrete. However, through the grief, I was found to be quite inconsolable. I withdrew from what friends and family I had left at that time, and I was determined to find what I was searching for, even if I was to never wake up. It was in this mindset in which I set out to ruin my life, or what life I had left to ruin. On this foolhardy mission, I eventually found my current state. This was not before I found my answers. However, I wish that I had never had set on this adventure. For some time, I've made contact with other people in my dreams, or rather what appear to be people. I cannot be sure if these people are figments of my imagination, parts of my own psyche embodied and given life in these dream states, or if these places I travel actually exist, and the people who occupy them are other distant dreamers who share my ability. I'm not sure I will ever know for sure. However, a blonde girl has crossed my path on several of my nocturnal forays into the vast worlds of my dreams. At first meeting, she seemed familiar in a way, as if I had known her all my life. I could not recollect any prior meeting, save for maybe a chance encounter during my attempt at formal education. 2 nights ago, I found myself running down a hallway in what appeared to be an old English boarding school, following a blonde child. She guided me through ornate wooden doorways and winding halls to a stairwell deep within the school. The white walls covered in ivory and other flora made me feel safe and secure in this space. However, I could not get past the feeling that I was going somewhere that I was forbidden. Following this unnamed girl through this building whose purpose was only one that could be guessed at was something that I could not compel myself against. and the twisting hallways whose lengths and breadths seemed to span whole sections of time itself in the enormity of their construction. We moved forward as if resolute in purpose. As we moved, certain rumors and events started to form in my mind, as if something half remembered from some long past familiarity with the place had been stirred. It was as if some strange deja vu encroached upon my consciousness, as if from some deeper dream within a dream. I knew where we were going, though in my thoughts I could not form purpose or reason. Running for what seemed forever, we finally achieved our apparent goal. This familiar girl, whose name treaded lightly upon my lips, beckoned me to a small alcove apparently hidden under a stone stairway. The ornate nature of the wooden trim that surrounded the thick, heavy oak door was different than that I had seen in the rest of the building. Rather than the floral and decorative patterns found in those previous furnishings, these had darker hints. Within the twisted vines and unknown vegetation presented in the relief was a strange sigil. In appearance, it was reminiscent of dual spires, perhaps similar to those of the lost towers of Kantar, whose magical properties were often guessed at in low whispers here upon my many travels through this dreamscape. The bottom of the sigil was rounded, and the spires appeared to be connected at the midsection. The whole thing was encased in a circle, and strange glyphs were placed around it. My interest must have crept across my face because as I was examining the sigil, making each of the lines into my memory, the girl, whose name still eluded me, tugged at the fabric of my coattail and pleaded with me not to waste any more time. She seemed as if panicked, that if we were discovered in this part of the building, we would suffer some horrible fate. Through this alcove was the entrance to a small stone staircase that wound itself slowly down into the depths of the earth. The further the stair descended into the darkness, the faster my feeling of security vanished. The stairs seemed to wind down into eternity, for the girl and I seemed to descend these rough-hewn stone steps for hours. All sense of time and space seemed to scarcely exist in the inky spiral of those stairs. More than once it felt as if the walls that surrounded the stairs simply disappeared, as the feeling of vast openness seemed to permeate the air. At the bottom of this stair were vast empty halls. These too seemed to stretch into creation, neither their ends never seen, nor their distance ever truly gauged by eye. Here our pace became measured, for as we traveled further into the deeper, darker areas of this basement area, I came to find it guarded by those faceless, cloaked figures. We moved silently from one new hallway to the next, pausing to make sure that the robed figures would not catch us in our act. The girl was quite adamant that we are not seen, speaking of horrific dangers that would befall us if it were to happen. It seemed to be forever before we reached our desired location. It was a large wooden door at the end of one of the elephantine hallways. Without thinking, I reached for the handle as my curiosity and eagerness took control of my actions. The girl almost shrieked as I blatantly opened the door, her face turning a pale color as the light from the other side of the door started to flood the darkened hallway in which we were standing. Words failed to impart the wholeness of what lay before us. Once we slid into the room and secured the door, I found myself just wandering across the room in a daze of confusion and ecstatic revelation, for surrounding me appeared to be a repository of all knowledge. The lower levels appeared to be of stone and clay, then eventually papyrus and on towards books. From what I could see from the highest levels, there were strange characters imprinted on strange metallic-looking sheets. It was here that I found the answers I so carelessly sought. For it was found that deep in these catacombs, deep in a hidden library of otherworldly knowledge, the truth lay hidden for only the most adventurous minds to find. It was here that I finally knew what it was I was searching for, and who it was who had led me this far. For then, as I was looking at her, the girl appeared older, more mature in her appearance. I knew that face from my exhausting trips through this dream reality, for her and I had spent many hours in deep conversation covering a myriad of topics. She was my Celine. With the help of Celine, I had found the knowledge I so willfully sought. It seems that the being that these robed figures were attempting to conjure was me. I was to be their doorway, the passageway for them to gain their freedom. Freedom from what hellish domain in which they had languished for an eternity, no one knows. Now I'm afraid it may be too late. The physicians are baffled as to what could be the cause of my symptoms, as my paralysis seems to be never ending. They cannot see any root cause to which to attribute the lack of mobility or feeling, nor can they tell the extent to which the ailment could progress. As I lay here, unmoving. I know the cause, and that those faceless beings who have orchestrated this have free reign of this realm. In attempting to discover the truth, I have inadvertently unleashed these creatures upon our world. I have no strength left to fight. Tonight, I attempt to find a way to stop them. I have every hope that Celine and I can find a way to undo this. Either way, I know that I will not be able to communicate with the rest of the world. I am sorry for the pain that will come if I am not successful. These figures must be stopped. Charles Michael Allen, CMA.